My name's Phil Smith, I'm BHA Head of Handicapping, and I had the responsibility of putting a rating through for Frankel for his last run. Before that, he was the responsibility of my colleague Dominic Gardner-Hill. Okay, well, the first time he performed to 140 was in the Queen Anne Stakes this year at Royal Ascot, where he thrashed the field by something like 11 lengths. And whenever we're producing a performance figure, we try and find a horse that we think has run to its rating, and we base the race through that. And so we went through the second horse there, and he gave the horse a good thrashing, and we came out with 140. The second time he performed to that level was in the Juddmonte at York. And again, we looked at the beaten horses, Far and St Nicholas Abbey, and we had them performing at 124. And then it's just a question of what we call the lengths victory. Now, I interpreted that victory as 9 1/4 lengths. And as a result, 9 1/4 lengths over 1 1/4 would be the equivalent of £16. As the beaten horses were both on 124, 124 plus 16 was 140. So we got him replicating his performance at York from the one he did at Royal Ascot. Well, he'll have to. The horse that's second highest rated is Sinister Zegel. We've currently got on 130, so he has to just beat Sinister Zegel to perform to 131, assuming everything sort of fits in neatly behind Sinister Zegel. For example, Nathaniel is the third highest in the race, so he's on 126. So if he was beaten, shall we say, about 2 1/4 lengths by Sinister Zegel's, then we'd have a situation where you could assume 2 1/4 is £4, assume that Sinister had done a 130. That Nathaniel had done a 126, and therefore if he beat Sinister Zegel by a head, Frankel would be performing to 131. Now, and of course there's a lot of other ifs and buts there, because obviously if you have a horse, for example, like Bullet Train, if he happened to be just a head behind Nathaniel, then as he's only rated 113 and has had lots and lots of tries, you know, we'd be pretty reluctant to suddenly believe that he was a pound behind Nathaniel. So the general view then would be that neither of those two horses, him and Sinister Zegel, had done their stuff, and so we'd probably be going quite low. So a lot would depend not just on who he beats who's second, not on who he beats third, but also the distances back to the other horses. For example, Pastorius, he's on 122, so in a perfect world, how nice would it be if he was beaten 2 1/4 lengths by Nathaniel? Ridicina, the mare, she gets £3, she's on 119, so you add the £3 to 119, she's a 122, so it'd be wonderful if she dead heated with Pastorius. But these are all absolutely perfect worlds. We don't ever get that situation, but in a perfect world, just if that happened, then we could get him to 131 if he beat the Sinister Zegel by a head and everything fitted in neatly behind. The chances of that happening are fairly remote, and so let's just hope he wins. Well, the ground is likely to be soft stroke heavy. So the first thing is that the judge will be working on 5 lengths per second. All right? So let's say Frankel wins by a second, the judge will call that 5 lengths. If that's an all-out victory, all right, and it couldn't be more than 5 lengths, then I'd probably call that £8. So a 5-length victory, and again everything fitting in absolutely perfectly behind, would get him to 138. So you're looking at 6, 6.5, stroke 7 lengths with everything fitting in perfectly behind to be looking at a 141, 142. In other words, he has to beat these really, really good horses incredibly convincingly. He's been doing that to other horses, but he's yet to come up against a Sinister Zegel. He's yet to come up against a horse as good as Nathaniel is now. Obviously, he beat him on their debut, but they were both in the 90s then. So he's never taken on a 126 horse since Canford Cliffs. He certainly hasn't taken on a 130 horse before. So these are the best 2 horses that he's taken on now for quite some time. So it's a huge ask just to win the race. Well, that's utter nonsense. He's been campaigned absolutely brilliantly. They've found the perfect races for him. To say that he could have got higher than that is just crazy. Let's say he'd run in the Arc. Right? Solomia, the winner of the Arc, let's assume she'd finished second to him. She's rated 122. She'd be getting £3 sex allowance. For him to do a 141, 142 in the arc, he'd have had to have won the arc by 10/11 lengths. That's just utterly unrealistic. So a lot of people have said that, but they really should know better. I think that the thing that you get with Frankel, forget the figures that we have to work to, but I'm a racing fan first and foremost, and the best thing about him is the exuberant style of running. You know, you need to think back to the 2000 Guineas when he burst out the stalls and went hell for leather down the Rowley Mile, and nobody could believe their eyes. And after 2 furlongs, when he was 7 lengths clear, everyone thought it was all going to end in doom. But he had the ability to keep up that incredible pace for a mile, and the Rowley Mile is a really stiff mile. The final half furlong is uphill. He was still going at the end, and he thrashed the field. All of his other races, you know, he's winning by Group 1s by 11 lengths and 7 lengths. Group 1 races are usually an absolute slog. Horses, you know, they get right down to the utter depths when they win Group 1 races, usually by a head or half a length or a length. You know, he's winning Group 1 races by 7 lengths, 8 lengths, 10 lengths. You know, that's stunning. I mean, just in terms of the visual impression he gets, I've only ever seen one horse in my racing career of sort of over 40 years who did something as visually stunning, and that was a Razi, who was a 2-year-old, won the Breeders' Cup, and that was a visually stunning. That was like a sort of a Hollywood B movie when he just came shooting past the whole field, and that's the sort of impression that you get with Frankel. So forget the figures, just visually he's stunning. The Juddmonte, taking on really good horses, he just cruised up to them and cruised past them. You know, again, you don't get Group 1 horses doing things like that. So visually, he's been absolutely fantastic. And as a physical specimen, he's absolutely fantastic. And when you add that to the quality of the performances arithmetically, which we get to, you know, 8 130 plus performances doesn't happen. 2 140 plus horses, no horse has ever done a 140 twice. You know, wouldn't it be wonderful if he could do another one on Saturday? But the fact that he's done it twice, Dancing Brave, Alleged, Shergar, they're the only other 140 horses. They only ever did it once. You know, so he's done it twice at 2 different distances. Amazing. Well, first of all, one was 26 years ago. And we have an international panel of handicappers now who assess Frankel, and we meet in Hong Kong at the end of the year, and we thrash out his form and we debate it and we come up with a figure. For example, last year we went with a figure of 135, and after a lot of debate he was given 136. So it's quite feasible the horses do get promoted, although there are a lot of times when they get reduced in Hong Kong as well. There is nobody who is on the panel of international handicappers now that were there in 1986. Handicapping methodology has completely changed in 26 years, the same as virtually every job has done. PR work is completely different now than it was 26 years ago. Marketing is completely different now than it was 26 years ago. Handicapping is no different. So it's hugely difficult to do a comparison between the 2 horses. I'm slightly reluctant to rewrite history and say Dancing Brave wouldn't have got 141 now. But it is interesting to note that when I've looked at the race, I'd be a bit surprised if we would have got him to the same figure. Saying that, he beat a stellar field. And the reason I'd be a little bit doubtful is last year there were 2 horses at the end of the year who were in the 130s in the world, Black Caviar and Frankel. In 1986, the international handicappers then had 6 horses who were at 130 plus. Now I'm slightly dubious that there were 6 horses in 1986 who were worth a 130 plus mark, and then we were only dealing with 5 countries, the 5 main European countries, Britain, France, Ireland, Germany and Italy. It's a little bit strange to me that in 2011, when we're dealing with the world, there are now only 2. So I think that the methodology has changed. You'd expect that. So to make those comparisons are hugely difficult. As well as that, Dancing Brave operated in a completely different style to Frankel. Dancing Brave was a last to first horse who basically killed his opposition with a huge turn of foot at the end of the race. Frankel isn't quite the same type of horse. His style of running is a little bit more exuberant, a little bit more dramatic than Dancing Brave's. But saying that, Frankel hasn't met the quality of field that Dancing Brave met in the Arc. I mean, I've just got the list of horses here. The second was Bering, who was a French Derby winner. The third was Triptych, who was a Champion Stakes winner. The fourth was Sharastani, who was a Derby winner. The fifth was Shadari, who was a Judmont International winner. The sixth was Derara, a Prix Vermeil winner. The seventh was a Catanango, a Grand Prix de Saint-Cloud winner, etc., etc., etc. Frankel has not met that quality of field before. There's a huge difference then. But saying that, I've still got my doubts as to whether all of those horses would be rated 130 plus nowadays. So things have changed. I've tried to make a case both for Dancing Brave and for Frankel there because it's hugely difficult. We're dealing with 26 years ago. I mean, how do you compare Messi and Maradona? Is a similar type of thing. So very difficult. They're both fantastic horses, but there are certain things that Frankel has done, obviously, which Dancing Brave didn't do, and this the 2 140 performances and the 8 130 performances, which I think are absolutely stunning in his consistency. And so far, let's hope it stays that way, he's unbeaten. Dancing Brave was beaten at a point in time. So, it's difficult to say between the two. Well, probably 3, I say. First of all, even though arithmetically it wasn't, anywhere near his top performance, the 2000 Guineas was the time when, first of all, you knew he trained on from 2 to 3. It was also the time when you realised it didn't really matter that he wasn't amenable to restraint. He could win anyway. It made you look at the race and think, well, God, he could win over 6 furlongs perfectly easily. So that was, again, probably the most visually stunning race. But this year, Royal Ascot and York were both fantastic performances because it's so unusual to see Group 1s won by so far. And the jockey really wasn't trying to win by a huge distance. It wasn't as if he was riding the horse out to win by the biggest. He was just, fairly easy on him, and he just thrashed these Group 1 horses. Well, the last horse like Frankel was Dancing Brave. Whether he was a bit below him, a bit ahead of him, the same is a matter of debate. That was 26 years ago. So you may well see another horse like Frankel, but the chances are I won't.